The conference room was quiet, almost eerily so. Barack Obama walked in, his presence calm but unmistakable. He didn't have an entourage. No bodyguards lined the walls. No assistants trailed behind with notes or laptops. He wore a simple, fitted shirt and dark jeans, casual, approachable, almost unassuming. Across the room, Keanu Reeves sat at the table, leaning back slightly, his trademark smirk barely visible. His black leather jacket hung loosely on the chair beside him, sneakers planted firmly on the floor. He was relaxed, but the way his eyes studied Obama gave the impression that he was quietly analyzing everything, every movement, every expression. "Do you really think that move works?" Keanu asked, voice low but sharp, carrying a weight that instantly grabbed everyone's attention. His words weren't loud, but they cut through the silence like a blade. The smirk on his face wasn't just teasing, it was deliberate. Barack paused. The former president's face didn't change. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't snap back. But internally, he registered the challenge. Everyone else in the room shifted slightly, caught between curiosity and tension. Some glanced at each other nervously. Who was really in control here? No one else seemed to notice the subtle game unfolding. On the surface, it looked like playful banter, a casual exchange between two adults. But underneath, it was a test of composure, patience, and perception. In that moment, no title mattered. No history mattered. Only the interaction itself carried weight. Barack knew this immediately. He understood that influence and authority aren't proven in moments of agreement. They're proven in moments like this, when someone questions you unexpectedly, when they throw subtle challenges your way, when the room suddenly grows silent because everyone senses tension but doesn't know who will speak first. Keanu's eyes didn't leave him. Barack could feel the quiet judgment, the unspoken evaluation. For a moment, even the former president, used to scrutiny, used to commanding attention worldwide, felt the unusual discomfort of being quietly assessed. He wasn't insulted, but he felt the weight of every gaze, the tension of every heartbeat in the room. And then, just as quickly as it began, Barack smiled slightly, almost imperceptibly. He didn't speak yet. He simply acknowledged the challenge, calm, composed, and aware. The room remained quiet, but the energy had shifted. Everyone in attendance could feel it, even if they didn't yet understand why. Barack Obama wasn't just a visitor. He was a former president, a leader who had guided a nation through crises, triumphs, and intense scrutiny. Yet here he was, in a casual shirt and jeans, seemingly ordinary, almost blending into the room. No one outside knew that he carried with him the weight of decades of leadership experience. Keanu Reeves, sitting across the table, leaned slightly forward. His black leather jacket and relaxed posture betrayed nothing, but his eyes told a different story. He wasn't here to intimidate. He wasn't here for theatrics. This wasn't about celebrity or ego. Keanu was observing, analyzing, and subtly testing. Every glance, every word he spoke, was designed to see beyond appearances, to see the true character behind the calm exterior. Most of the people in the room didn't recognize the significance of the moment. Some assumed this was a casual meeting between two well-known figures. Others were curious, quietly trying to gauge the mood. But the underlying tension was unmistakable. Barack wasn't here for attention. He wasn't here to assert authority or demand respect. He was here to demonstrate something far more profound. How true leadership shows itself when titles, power, and appearances are stripped away. For years, Barack had been under constant scrutiny. From the Oval Office to international summits, he had learned that authority isn't proven in moments of agreement or applause. It's proven when your decisions are challenged unexpectedly, when your ideas are doubted, or when someone questions your judgment in front of others. Leadership, he understood, is as much about composure and restraint as it is about decisive action. Keanu's question from earlier, "Do you really think that move works?" was more than a casual comment. It was a deliberate challenge, a small spark meant to test composure, patience, and perspective. In a way, this was a mirror moment. How would a great leader react when confronted, subtly provoked, and placed under quiet scrutiny? Would he react with irritation, defensiveness, or pride? Or would he remain calm, measured, and deliberate, showing that influence comes from self-control, not confrontation? Barack's gaze met Keanu's, steady and unwavering. He understood the unspoken rules of this interaction. Nothing in the room could shake him. His history, his experience, and his inner confidence gave him the clarity to see what was really happening. This wasn't about proving dominance. It wasn't about being right or winning an argument. It was about demonstrating integrity, awareness, and composure under pressure. The others in the room, mostly silent observers, began to sense the stakes. The dynamic wasn't just between Barack and Keanu. It was a lesson unfolding in real time. How does one carry authority without arrogance? How does one respond to challenge without defensiveness? How does one show true leadership without needing to declare it? For Barack, this moment was familiar. He had faced countless challenges in the public eye. Yet this was different. Here in a quiet room, under a subtle but piercing gaze, the lesson wasn't about politics or strategy. It was about presence, character, and the quiet power of composure. The silence in the room was heavy, almost tangible, like the calm before a storm. Barack Obama remained seated, his posture relaxed, his expression composed. But the energy in the room had shifted. Keanu Reeves, leaning back in his chair, let a faint, deliberate smirk play across his face. There was no malice, no overt aggression, just a quiet, precise observation, as if he were testing the waters, probing the limits of patience. Honestly, Keanu said, voice low and measured, that plan seems laughable. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They carried a subtle sting, cutting through the quiet with the precision of a scalpel. A few people in the room chuckled nervously, unsure whether they were witnessing banter, confrontation, or some sort of challenge they didn't fully understand. Others shifted in their seats, glancing at Barack for a reaction, as if waiting for a crack in the former president's composure. Barack didn't flinch. He didn't shift. He didn't even blink faster than usual. But inside, he registered the weight of the comment, the room's tension, the unspoken judgments of the observers. He understood what was happening. This was a subtle test, a challenge disguised as an insult. Keanu wasn't here to embarrass him. He was here to measure calm under pressure, to see how a seasoned leader reacts when placed in an unexpected situation. The moment stretched. Seconds became minutes. The silence was punctuated only by faint scribbles of notes and the quiet hum of air conditioning. Some attendees exchanged uncertain glances, whispering quietly, trying not to draw attention to themselves. Everyone sensed that the exchange between Barack and Keanu was more than it appeared. It was a duel of presence, a test of character, a quiet battle for respect that no one else could truly see. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. The smirk lingered, challenging but not cruel. "Do you really believe that approach will succeed?" he asked, his tone even, almost conversational, but with an edge that demanded consideration. The question wasn't about strategy. It was about patience, composure, and reaction. Would Barack rise to the bait? Would he respond with irritation, defensiveness, or pride? Or would he demonstrate the subtle authority that comes from true leadership? For Barack, the choice was clear. Leadership wasn't about proving you were right. It wasn't about asserting dominance or delivering a comeback. True authority is measured in moments like this, quiet, unexpected, intimate moments where ego can betray judgment, where composure can define legacy. He felt the room watching, waiting for a crack that would never come. Instead of responding immediately, Barack simply inhaled, letting the words settle. He maintained eye contact, calm and deliberate, as if the room itself had paused to see what would happen next. The tension was almost unbearable, and yet he radiated a quiet certainty. He understood that this moment was more than an exchange of opinions. It was a demonstration of how true leaders respond when challenged, when judged, when insulted. The observers, now silent, felt the weight of the lesson unfolding before them. Some realized they had underestimated the power of restraint. Others recognized that the room's tension wasn't just about the words spoken. It was about the mastery of self in the face of subtle provocation. For a long moment, the room remained frozen, as if time itself had paused. Barack Obama's calm presence contrasted sharply with the subtle tension radiating from Keanu Reeves and the other attendees. The quiet smirk on Keanu's face lingered, not malicious, but intentionally challenging, as if he were daring Obama to respond in some dramatic, ego-fueled way. But Barack didn't rise to the bait. He didn't flinch. He didn't mutter a word. He simply exhaled, allowing the silence to stretch, each second heavier than the last. Everyone in the room felt it. Observers could no longer pretend this was just another meeting. This was a test. The air seemed charged, the kind of energy that makes a quiet room feel as though it could ignite at any moment. Some attendees fidgeted nervously, glancing at each other, wondering if they should speak or remain silent. But the lesson unfolding wasn't for them to disrupt. It was for them to witness. Keanu leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, locked onto Barack's. "So, are you going to defend it, or just sit there?" he asked, voice casual, but carrying a weight that demanded an answer. On the surface, it seemed like a simple question, but underneath, it was a challenge, a subtle attempt to provoke a reaction, to see if authority could be shaken. Barack smiled faintly, a quiet, knowing smile that didn't reveal arrogance or anger. Instead, it revealed awareness. He had faced challenges before, in arenas far more dangerous and scrutinized than this. He understood that power isn't demonstrated in loud reactions or sharp comebacks. It's demonstrated in calm, measured presence, in the ability to let others reveal themselves through their actions, words, and intent. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, steady, and deliberate. "Sometimes, the right path isn't the one everyone sees." The room went silent. Every subtle laugh, every whispered conversation, every hint of amusement vanished. Even Keanu paused mid-smirk, his eyes narrowing slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. That single sentence, so calm, so understated, had shifted the entire dynamic. It wasn't a defense. It wasn't a justification. It was a quiet assertion of perspective, a reminder that leadership isn't about proving yourself in the moment. It's about staying true to principle, even when others doubt or mock. The observers felt the shift immediately. The subtle energy of challenge, the tension that had been thick moments before, now settled into something else, reflection. People began to see the exchange for what it truly was. Keanu's challenge had been a test, and Barack's response had demonstrated exactly what it was meant to reveal: composure, patience, and the quiet strength of experience. No one spoke. No one dared interrupt. The room had transformed from a space of casual observation into a crucible of character. Every gesture, every pause, every glance was now magnified. Barack didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to assert dominance. His calm, measured response had spoken volumes, and the lesson was unmistakable. Authority and respect are earned through presence and clarity, not through reaction or aggression. Keanu, for his part, leaned back again, absorbing the impact of that calm reveal. He had been testing, probing, subtly challenging, and now he understood the depth of the lesson he had inadvertently helped unfold. This was more than just a display of wit or cleverness. It was a demonstration of how true leadership responds when confronted with doubt, subtle mockery, or quiet provocation. The rest of the room remained silent, yet each attendee felt the weight of the moment. The subtle power dynamic had shifted entirely. Where moments before there had been tension and uncertainty, there was now recognition. Recognition that composure under pressure reveals more than words ever could. Barack didn't say another word. He simply allowed the silence to linger, a quiet reminder that presence, integrity, and calm are often far more powerful than loud declarations or defensive arguments. One sentence, delivered with unwavering calm, had changed the entire atmosphere of the room. The silence that followed Barack Obama's calm statement was profound. The room, once filled with tension, now hummed with reflection. Every attendee, from the youngest aide to the seasoned executive, felt a shift in energy. This wasn't about wit, power, or a clever comeback anymore. It was about perspective. Barack's simple words had peeled back the layers, revealing the essence of true leadership: composure, clarity, and awareness. Keanu Reeves, still seated, studied him intently. The subtle challenge he had posed earlier, the slight smirk, the deliberate questioning, the quiet provocation, had been met not with defensiveness, but with insight. Keanu's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in acknowledgement. He realized that this interaction wasn't a battle to win or a moment to humiliate someone. It was a lesson unfolding in real time. Just as the room began to process the gravity of the moment, A quiet sound interrupted the heavy silence. An assistant stepped into the room, holding a stack of documents, her hands trembling slightly. "There's something you need to see," she said, voice low. She hesitated, as if unsure whether she should continue, and then handed the documents directly to Barack. As he took them, the nature of the situation became clear. The files contained detailed plans for changes within the organization, major restructuring that would affect dozens of employees, financial transfers that had been hidden from most of the staff, decisions made behind closed doors, without transparency. It was not just about perception or etiquette anymore. The stakes were real, tangible, and potentially devastating. Barack's gaze swept across the room. The employees, executives, and observers suddenly understood the seriousness of the situation. What had begun as a subtle test of character now revealed the deeper reality. The organization's future, and the well-being of its people, depended on how these revelations were handled. The quiet tension now held the weight of responsibility. For Barack, the lesson was twofold. First, it wasn't enough to command respect through authority or reputation alone. True leadership required insight into how people operated under pressure, how decisions were made, and how challenges were addressed when no one was watching. Second, the responsibility to act decisively, ethically, and transparently was far more important than any single moment of pride or recognition. Keanu watched silently, recognizing the gravity of the unfolding scenario. His initial challenge had been intended to test composure, but it had inadvertently exposed a far larger truth: the integrity and accountability of the organization itself. The playful smirk had transformed into a contemplative expression. He realized that the real power of this moment lay not in words or appearances, but in the careful observation of behavior and reaction under unexpected circumstances. Barack took a deep breath and addressed the room, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't about mistakes or missteps," he said. "It's about understanding the consequences of our actions, the transparency we owe each other, and the respect we owe to those whose lives are affected by decisions made behind closed doors." Heads nodded quietly. Some employees' eyes filled with relief, while others reflected on how easily minor arrogance or oversight could ripple into serious consequences. The lesson was unmistakable. Leadership isn't defined by titles, accolades, or appearances. It's defined by awareness, accountability, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The room's atmosphere shifted again. The focus moved from tension to responsibility. Where moments ago there had been nerves, now there was clarity. Where there had been subtle insults and unspoken challenges, now there was reflection and accountability. Everyone began to grasp the larger picture. How even subtle actions, unchecked assumptions, or ignored warnings could accumulate into decisions with real consequences. Barack's calm presence anchored the room. His reaction demonstrated that leadership isn't about dominating a conversation or asserting authority. It's about recognizing the stakes, absorbing the information, and responding with measured clarity. One moment of composure had led to a cascade of understanding, a deeper awareness of the consequences of actions, and an acknowledgement that integrity always matters more than ego. The room was quiet, but the silence was different now. It was no longer tension-filled or uncertain. It was the heavy, focused silence of realization, the kind that settles when a lesson hits hard, when people recognize the weight of responsibility, and when they see the consequences of actions laid bare before them. Barack Obama stood slowly, his presence commanding without demanding. Every eye in the room was on him, not out of fear, but out of respect. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He allowed a brief pause, letting the gravity of the moment sink in. Then he spoke, each word deliberate, calm, and unwavering. "I didn't come here for recognition," he began. "I didn't come here to prove who's right or to assert authority. I came here to see how we respond when our decisions affect others, when assumptions go unchecked, and when the people around us might be quietly watching, waiting to see who we really are." He let that hang in the air for a moment. The employees, executives, and observers were all absorbing it, understanding that this wasn't about blame. It was about reflection, about accountability, about the deeper responsibility that comes with leadership, whether you're leading a nation, a company, or a team. Barack continued, his tone steady, firm but empathetic. "Respect isn't about titles. It isn't about appearances. It isn't about the loudest voice in the room or the one with the biggest nameplate on the door. Respect is about how we treat others every day, especially when no one is watching, when no one expects recognition, when no one is there to applaud. The room was silent. Even Keanu Reeves, who had subtly challenged him earlier, seemed to pause and reflect. His playful smirk had faded into contemplation. The lesson was clear. Leadership isn't earned through ego or intimidation. It's earned through consistent integrity, fairness, and awareness. Barack's gaze swept across the room, landing briefly on each face, ensuring that everyone felt the message. From this moment forward, he said, our expectations are simple, but non-negotiable. Every interaction, every decision, every conversation must reflect courtesy, transparency, and accountability. We do not judge people by appearances, by position, or by assumptions. We listen. We consider. We act responsibly. Some heads nodded quietly. A few employees whispered to one another, already reflecting on past moments where these principles hadn't been upheld. The subtle lesson Barack had demonstrated through calm composure and measured words was already resonating. People weren't reacting out of fear. They were thinking, internalizing, and preparing to act differently moving forward. He leaned slightly forward, lowering his voice just enough to draw everyone in, emphasizing the point with clarity. Power isn't something we wield to impress or intimidate. Power exists to guide, to protect, and to ensure that the decisions we make do not harm those who depend on us. True leadership is measured not by who we dominate, but by how we inspire, respect, and uplift everyone around us. The impact of his words was visible. Shoulders relaxed, eyes widened with understanding. Subtle nods of acknowledgement rippled through the room. The employees, previously focused on hierarchy and appearances, now felt the weight of responsibility in a new way. They saw clearly that the culture, the integrity, and the future of their organization weren't just dictated by rules. They were defined by the character of every individual and every decision. Keanu leaned back, almost imperceptibly, and gave a small nod. His initial challenge, the subtle insult, the quiet test, had served its purpose, and Barack's measured response had elevated the moment into something far greater than a confrontation. It had become a lesson in real leadership. The tension that had gripped the room for so long began to dissipate. Barack Obama remained standing, his presence calm, yet unmistakably authoritative. The subtle test, the quiet challenge from Keanu Reeves, the unexpected revelations about the organization's plans, all of it had brought the room to a pivotal moment. Now, it was time to draw the lesson into focus. Barack looked around at everyone, the executives, the assistants, the observers who had quietly watched, and even Keanu, who had been a catalyst in this exercise. His voice, steady and empathetic, filled the room. Your jobs are safe, he said. The words carried relief, but also clarity. This isn't about punishment. This is about understanding, about reflection, about ensuring that our actions, our words, and our decisions align with integrity, respect, and responsibility. A collective exhale passed through the room. Shoulders relaxed. Faces softened. The atmosphere shifted from tension to understanding. The employees realized that what they had witnessed wasn't simply a confrontation or a critique. It was a demonstration of leadership in its truest form. Barack's calm response had shown that authority doesn't need to be shouted or flaunted. It is expressed through clarity, fairness, and accountability. Keanu Reeves leaned back in his chair, nodding subtly. His challenge, intended to provoke, had evolved into something far greater, a shared lesson in character and perspective. The subtle smirk that had once hinted at playful provocation had now been replaced with respect. Respect for composure, for insight, and for the ability to turn a potential moment of conflict into an opportunity for learning. Barack continued, addressing the room with a focus that seemed to resonate in every corner. This organization, like any team, succeeds not because of titles or appearances, but because of how we treat each other, especially in moments when no one expects recognition. Real character is revealed in how we respond to challenges, how we maintain integrity, and how we ensure accountability at every level. He paused, letting the words sink in. People reflected on their past actions, on moments when ego might have influenced decisions, or when subtle biases might have gone unchecked. The lesson was clear. Leadership is not about being the loudest voice in the room or the one with the highest title. Leadership is about fostering a culture where respect, transparency, and ethical behavior are the standard, not the exception. The room was quiet again, but this time it was a contemplative silence. A silence filled with understanding. People were processing the insight they had witnessed, recognizing that their roles and responsibilities carried weight beyond daily tasks. They realized that influence and power are not earned through intimidation or status. They are earned through consistent integrity and the respect shown to others, regardless of rank. Barack looked at Keanu one last time, a faint smile acknowledging the subtle challenge that had set this lesson in motion. Then he turned back to the group. From this moment forward, let's ensure that our actions reflect the values we claim to uphold. Let's remember that respect is earned not through position, but through how we treat those around us, especially those who have no power to reward or punish us. That is where true leadership lives. A feeling of relief, reflection, and quiet determination spread through the room. What had begun as a moment of challenge and subtle insult had transformed into a powerful lesson in leadership, accountability, and character.